Hello, you may also know me as Katarzyna Szymielewicz. I know it's difficult, and I work in Panoptykon Foundation in Poland, which is the NGO I founded 8 years ago. So for the last 8 years, I was often the one out there in the public who used to be more critical about technology than mainstream, who used to see potential dangers in how technology shapes our lives, who often said that this is far from being neutral. But I'm also not the one who would blame technology for our failures with regard to political, economic, or social life. So when the terrible 2016 happened and many people got disappointed, mostly with the results of political processes, and the thinking about technology moved from optimism to some kind of dystopian ideas that with data on the other side and internet, we as humans are losing. The key game, which is the political game these days, has always been, and I think for a long time will be, the key game we play with those who have in power. I didn't feel relieved. I must say I felt a bit concerned, because the more we pose the more we stress the agency of machines, technology, and algorithms, the less we see humans in that. It's not to say that I don't appreciate how big impact algorithms have on our lives, including micro-targeting, the use of data analytics, be that for the results of the election, as we have seen in the Trump presidential race, or at the situation that happens in the countries after the new government is established. There is good reason why we appreciate the role of bots as new important agents of the political sphere, where they might very effectively influence the narrative that spreads around social media and the kind of temperature of the debate that we feel, we sense as human beings. But this is taking the agency in a very simplified way. What I would like to do today is to look a bit deeper underneath those layers of technology to question for a while who is behind that, who is designing it, who is manipulating it or gaming it, and who are the people on the other side. Who are us, and what is our role or our potential agency in changing the power balance we might not like so much looking backwards. So take a look at that picture. I believe many of you have seen it already. It's a quite famous graph prepared by Craig Silverman for the BuzzFeed in November 2016, right after Trump's victory, suggesting, as you can see, that in the Trump election run-up, especially in the last days, people on Facebook interacted much more with fake news than they did with so-called real stories. It is a matter of fact, but how we interpret that fact. If we look at that scenario, what we really see here is this suggesting that people did so because Facebook's own algorithms show them mostly fake news, and this is why the fake spreads so well? Or is this mostly because humans chose to interact most with those stories that triggered emotions that were linked better to their expectations or their needs? Who was the agent? That is the answer we don't have from just looking at the facts. It needs much deeper research, which we might not necessarily have. But one thing we know, I think, for now, is that the fact whether that news was fake or real was not so much meaningful for those who clicked on it, yes? We rediscovered that there is a different wiring of our political brain. It's not so much about technology, it's about us not being so attached to facts anymore and actually openly saying that these are less relevant in the world dominated by political emotions and narratives that are not fact-based anymore. And this is the phenomenon that obviously many of you are discussing, and it rightly so takes a lot of space in the public debate. It could be the phenomenon that we should be looking much more deeply than the algorithms. And of course, there are filter bubbles that have been with us for at least 10 years, but suddenly they got rediscovered in the context of fake news as the phenomenon that has key impact on how people think, what people see. But again, what we don't know, and what has been said today many times by other speakers too, is to what extent the effect, the filter bubble effect, really is shaped by mere technology designed for us without transparency, or how much it's affected by us, by our choices, but what we choose to look at, and how much it might be gamed by third parties like the botnets who might be designed by somebody else. So what really is the power balance behind the filter bubbles? We don't know. But there is the reality outside. This is one of thousands of pictures of trees shared on social media in Poland after the Polish government adopted a new controversial law allowing every private owner of the land to remove trees that are disturbing him or her. So the trees were disappearing, and thousands of them were posted on social media. Not everybody saw them there, because not everybody belonged to this government-critical bubble. But I believe big majority, or even all the Polish people, saw one or two disappearing outside of their windows. So the trees kindly remind us that there is reality outside our filter bubbles, political, economic, social reality we live in. And that reality is not without an impact on how we think about politics and how we behave. So how will the next year, this year and next year, look for us? What can we change in our behavior online and offline to correct the power imbalance and give ourselves back a bit more control? Again, if you look at Poland, with all the technology that is controlled by the government, with all the media which is effectively controlled by the government these days, we see some hope. We see that the polls are changing, and the PiS, who started, the Law and Justice ruling party, who started with great majority of people supporting them, now are feeling that there is somebody running after them. On the other hand, we have those players, many of you might recognize in this picture, transformed Cambridge Analytica logo, the company that still claims to be able to control the voters, to control how people behave in political context, mostly using their data and algorithms and data analysis. So for people like Cambridge Analytica, who are excellent in marketing their own marketing, it seems to be mostly the question of money and data being available. But what do we say? What is the response? If I look at the internet, if I look at what is going around me, not only in my bubble, I do try to go beyond that, I see that the response is far from game over. It's mostly that people say no to that feeling of being manipulated. And obviously, there are plenty of initiatives emerging in the US, in Europe, in Russia, that respond to the recent buzz around fake news. These are human-driven initiatives that use technology to trace what is credible, what is not, and to enable people making their own assessments more effectively. And a big part of those assessments, of course, comes through technology again. So to be able to judge fake or real news more efficiently, you can install a plugin in your browser who will give you a warning if the trusted news site of your choice signals that might not be credible. So we are back to the world of technology with slightly different concept of actually escaping the filter bubble or questioning what we see online. And there are initiatives like Sleeping Giants on Twitter, where people, mostly in the US, organize to exert pressure, real economic, client-driven pressure on companies who put their advertising on fake news sites. So there is good thinking, not driven by technology itself, but by the understanding that there is a market behind that, that without the money in their market, even fake news phenomenon wouldn't exist, because if fake news were not funded as easily, they couldn't spread and they couldn't be produced that effectively. So those initiatives bring us back to the human agency. And then, not for the last year, but for much more than last year, for at least 8 years of my work, I have witnessed a strong, consistent call for transparency of technology, which is, again, the call of humans, people like us, who have always been concerned with not really understanding the black boxes and questioning the black boxes. They are not only hackers. Sometimes they are activists, sometimes they are artists. This is a piece of excellent research done by ShareLabs, who presented it yesterday here in Berlin, showing how Facebook is doing the tracking and what kind of data exactly Facebook collects beyond our control, and how that data is processed in the algorithmic engine of Facebook to produce knowledge that then might be sold to such agents as Cambridge Analytica or any other advertising or marketing entities that want to try manipulating us. And there are initiatives like that one by Claudio Agosti, who started digging into Facebook algorithm from the side of the newsstream. So what really is in Facebook that dictates how we perceive the newsstream? How many elements of the newsstream come from our friends? How many of them is a paid content? How many of them come as a result of some non-transparent operations? Those things, if we dig deeper, can be found, and there are already people, and there have been people for a while, who are trying to find this, exactly for the reason of regaining control. Of course, transparency is not everything. The big term, the term I appreciate very much, is the call for much more, for algorithmic accountability. MIT published that paper again in November 2016, stressing that there is a need to redesign the way we think about algorithms themselves. So they coined 5 principles for people designing algorithms to increase accountability. And this year, we have seen that voice and many similar voices putting even more pressure on the very simple message. There is always human behind it. There's always human designing the algorithm, and we need to engage with those humans and their logic before we start asking for the code and before we even start discussing the technology, because the idea there might be not so complicated as the code itself. There are always people behind it. And some of them might be like Mark Zuckerberg, who believes that he can shape the global democracy in a better way than we might be shaping as people, as citizens. His response to the whole fuss around fake news was obviously, give me more control. I will redesign my algorithms to the way that you will no longer see fake, you will always see real, the way I define the real. So those ideas, again, they are open ideas. We don't have to dig into the code to understand the very logic behind Facebook empire. Facebook empire who collects data, processes data, makes algorithmic analysis in order to produce profiles that are marketing profiles for those who want to control us, but also who can become itself a political control machinery. And Zuckerberg is becoming very open about it, which is, I would say, like a red alert for all of us who are still there and who are feeding the empire with data. So at the end, it comes down to people behind the empire, behind every technology that is driven by personal data. At the end, it will be our choices, how we use Facebook, what we click on. Do we use plugins like Kill the Newsfeed, which is available, and you don't have to look at it at all? If we migrate out of the service at all, if we do whatever we think is adequate in the situation. So my main message today and my own take on this is a matrix. It's not a yes or no. It's not black or white, technology or humans. It's not right to say that we are winning the game. It wouldn't be right to say we are losing the game. But certainly we can understand the game in a much more nuanced way that has been suggested to us by mainstream media lamenting over botnets and algorithms as if those phenomena never existed last year, or listening to companies who say, it's up to you people. You are sharing the content. You are the ones who actually drive this machinery. None of those responses is really true. So my understanding of this is that we are in a much more complex situation that is not that novel in terms of agents and not that novel in terms of phenomena we are talking about. there has always been debate about illegal or harmful content online and how we deal with that content, how it gets deleted and removed. So the conversation about who has control over what we see is as old as the notice and takedown debate, as the censorship and hate speech debate. And there is another layer, which is filter bubbles, that has always been around us as long as we have social media that were built exactly to filter out the whole content that we cannot process and provide the personalized newspaper. And in those two phenomena, we have seen the development of legal regulations, like data protection regulations or notice and takedown regulations. We have seen a lot of business-driven solutions, like terms and conditions that every online company has that says what can stay, what should disappear. And we have flagging mechanisms or algorithmic decision-making that I mentioned, using Facebook as example in response to the fake news panic. And in between those, we have, of course, the layer where we operate, where all the civic actors can come up with their own way. They can come up with digital education, they can come up with simply changing the service they use, they can come up with many community-driven solutions and initiatives. So the middle ground is up to us, and it's extremely important that the middle ground exists, because this is how we can mediate between what business thinks as a right solution, which is mostly driven by money, since business is about making money and there is nothing strange about that, and between the political, which is where the power lies, the power operates, and where many agents might have different interests as we, being citizens and being in a way controlled by those who have the power. So this is the way I see it, and I would really love to engage in a little discussion, if we still have time with you, about how you feel in the matrix, how you find your place between the human and the tech, how much you feel that we can be in control, and can you think about any initiatives, especially civic-driven initiatives, that might offer some responses in the world where the narrative is shaped by non-transparent mechanisms, but we are the ones who might be working on opening them or questioning them or demanding more accountability for them. If we find the right place for us in this matrix, the game will be far from over, and there is a good hope that we can actually find a good spot for all of us. Thank you.
Test 1, 2. Actually, we have now 10 minutes for questions. So, anybody who has a question?
Or comments. I mean, actually, I would love to hear your opinions and views on that. To what extent?
Okay, short comments then, please. Come on, up front.
Hi. Thank you for the wonderful talk. I wanted to, it's like a common question. Where do you see plugins and other services that use an obfuscation approach? So the idea is to make you invisible. So for example, a service called ad nauseum, which clicks on all ads on a website and thus messes around with an algorithm. Is that something which is sufficient? Because that used to be the pipe dream of the cyberpunk movement, right? The mid-90s. If we're all invisible, then no one can see us and we can do whatever we want. Is that still a goal? Is that important in your eyes? Is that enough?
You mean the obfuscation, meaning disturbing the system with more data rather than hiding, right?
Exactly. And is that disturbance enough to enact a change, or is it just a tool for individuals to hide from specific services or organizations?
Yeah, I wouldn't say this is a tool to hide. I would say this is an excellent tool to confuse the system and make the work of the algorithmic system more difficult. But I wouldn't underappreciate the real capacity of the leading companies to differentiate which metadata, which behavior of us, which activity of us is the real one and which one is the fake one. Just relying on our ability to obfuscate, to produce noise, could be slightly too optimistic. That's also why I'm trying to show that phenomenon, that problem of political struggles with data and with us as actors as much more complex, rather escaping from one solution, be that law, be that tech, or be that our own activity. I do believe that all of these factors have to come together, and only then we can come to some balanced situations. I would say it's a great tool to use. Don't stop, but also don't think that that solves all our problems.
Okay, thank you.
Any other question? Last chance, last call. Any comment? Okay, thank you very much. I close this talk now.
Thank you.